Let's begin section 8.2 with markup on selling price. Let's talk just a minute about the difference between section 8.1, which was markup on cost, and now section 8.2 with markup on selling price. When we were told markup on cost, that told us that the cost was the base, or cost got the 100% in our calculations. In section 8.2, we're going to have markup on selling price. What that tells us is that the selling price is now the base, and the selling price is the 100%. So it's really just a difference in how your markup is calculated. Is your markup calculated as a percentage of the cost to the store, or is your markup calculated as a percentage of cost to the customer? We are still going to use that selling price is cost plus markup. When we find the percent markup on selling price, it's very similar to what we used before. We're going to put the markup amount in dollars in the numerator. The selling price now goes in the denominator because we're saying markup is on top of selling price. We convert that fraction to a decimal and then finally to a percent. Let's get started. The markup of a pair of batting gloves is $5.16. I'll put that in the chart right away. Markup is 35% of selling price. So that tells us two things. Markup is 35%. So we're going to put the 35% next to the markup row. It also tells us that because we're using a percent of selling price, 100% goes in the selling price row. And our final answer is going to be the cost of the batting gloves. We can work backwards here and know that 100% minus the 35% would give us the 65% of cost. Or you can think something plus 35% is 100% and solve. Okay. As we did before, I'm going to take that middle row and make it into an equation. Markup is 35%, and in this case, it's of selling price. It's really important to keep in mind what your markup is a percentage of. Is it of cost or of selling price? Because that makes a difference in our equation. The markup dollar amount is $5.16 is equal to, I'm going to change that 35% into its decimal equivalent, 0.35, and of selling price would be multiplication times our S variable. To solve and get that S variable alone, we're going to divide both sides by 0.35. And when I do that, on the right-hand side, I have variable S. On the left-hand side, with rounding, I get $14.74. To finish up, we can either use cost plus markup equals selling price to fill in the markup and selling price and solve for cost, or we can work here and work backwards. It will end up the same subtraction. With our subtraction, I get $9.58. So you're going to notice quite a lot of similarities in what we already did in section 8.1. The big difference is where the 100% is located in your chart. Let's go ahead and try another question. The selling price of a tennis racket is $15.99, so let's fill that in the selling price row. The markup is 20% of selling price. So notice that of selling price is what tells us the 100% goes in that selling price row. It also tells us the markup percentage is 20%. And we can work backwards to find the missing 80%. I'm going to go ahead and use that middle row. Markup is 20% of selling price. And then I'm going to convert it word for word into my equation. The markup dollar amount I don't know yet is equal to 20%. I will change to its decimal equivalent, and of selling price, of is our multiplication, and in this case we know selling price of $15.99. In this case, our M variable's already alone, and we can multiply, and I end up getting $3.20 when I round. Let me put that in the markup space. That then tells us we can work backwards and subtract to get the cost, or we can use that equation, cost plus markup equals selling price. And then also we'd be using subtraction with our equation. And I end up with a cost of $12.79. It asks us to find the markup, which we did, and it also asks us to find the cost, which we did. Let's try question 3. The cost of a dartboard is $27.45, and the markup is 25% of selling price. Find the markup and the selling price. Let's fill in what we know. So the cost is $27.45. The markup is 25% of selling price. Let's put the 25% in the markup row. And keep in mind, because we're talking about of selling price, that means the markup is a percentage of selling price. That's where our 100% goes with the selling price. Okay. Now what I'm noticing is something a little different in this question that we haven't done before, where we're given a cost, but our percentage is on selling price. Let me go ahead and go backwards and fill in that blank percentage that we don't know. Working backwards, we would take 100% minus the 25% to get the 75% that's missing. And then this completed row is where I'm going to write my equation. Cost is 75% of selling price. And I can go ahead and fill in the cost of $27.45 is equal to, I'm going to change the 75% into 0.75, and then times selling price. I only have my one variable, so I can divide by 0.75 to get that variable alone. Make sure you balance your equation. And in solving, I get that my selling price is equal to $36.60. And I put that right into my chart right away so I can see what I'm still missing. We can work backwards here to find the markup dollar amount, or we can use cost plus markup equals selling price and fill in what we know. We still end up with using subtraction, and our markup dollar amount ends up being $9.15. And we found the markup amount, and we found the selling price amount, which is the two things that they asked us for. Before I go on to the next video, let me just remind you right here in red why I chose to use a completed row to make my sentence and make my equation. Typically, I would have used the middle row. Markup is 25% of selling price. But remember, in the beginning, we didn't have all the green information. So if I didn't know my markup and I didn't know my selling price, I have too many variables in this equation and I can't solve. So that's why I went to where I had a completed row, and that completed row made a sentence, which then formed my equation. question 4 and question 5, you are actually given this yellow box on your formula sheet. So once you get to once you get to Unit 3, you're allowed a formula sheet on your exam, and this formula is given to you, not something you have to memorize. And it's just converting back and forth from percent markup to percent selling price, and then the other way around. If we want to convert a markup of 15% on cost to what it would be equivalent to as a markup on selling price, we can use this equation. We're going to round our final percent answer to the 1/10 of a percent. So let's fill in what we know. It's 15% markup on cost, so we're going to put that in the numerator, 15%. In the denominator, we have 100% plus that same 15%. And then we're going to reduce. Hopefully you remember that you can't reduce those 15% because of this plus sign. That plus sign means that those two percentages are connected and needed to be simplified. Now we can reduce those percent labels, and we can take and divide 15 divided by 115, and I get 0.13, which a bunch more decimal places. Let me go a couple more. And then I'm going to convert it to a percent. So that makes it 13.04%. And then finally, I'm going to round it to the nearest 1/10 of a percent, which is that first decimal. So 13.0%. And this is our markup on selling price. What they're saying is a 15% markup on cost would be equivalent to a 13% markup on selling price. Let's try that one more time. This time we have a markup on selling price, and we're going to make its equivalent to a markup on cost. So if we have a markup on selling price, we're going to put that in the numerator. And the denominator, we're going to have 100% minus the same percent on selling price. So simplifying our denominator, we get 60%, and we can reduce, and I get 0.666 bunches of sixes. And I'm going to convert it to a percent. So that would be 66 points, a lot more sixes. And then now I'm going to round it to the nearest 1/10, so that 1/10 of a percent would round to a 7. A 40% markup on selling price is equivalent to a 66.7% markup on cost. So there is a way to compare the two. We'll pick up with 2 more examples in the next video.